Well, here we are. Hello, everyone. And hey, Brett,
Hi, how are you doing, Kelly?
I am fine. Well, we heard from Dave. He's not able to make it today, so we'll catch up with him and see him next month. But I'm excited to get to talk with you about our book.
Yeah, we
Um,
haven't done this just you and I like this for quite a while.
yeah. But before we
Feels
dig
like
into,
old times.
yeah, before we dig into the book, do you want to do an introduction and share any kind of an update?
Sure, I got a few things here. So, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to our conversation. We're going to talk about the 6 Types of Working Genius by Patrick Lencioni. We like to really emphasize why we're here. That Simon Sinek thing. What's our mission statement? Uh, to inspire the leaders of tomorrow to invest in themselves today. We coined that several conversations ago, and it really stuck. I think it resonates, and I use that both on our conversations as well as outside. So really fond of that. And as you guys know, in organizations today, mission statements have just become table stakes and simply how we approach every month. Each month when I get fired up to read the book, and I keep asking myself, why do I keep doing this? And I keep going back to that. So, Kelly works in education, and I work in international agriculture and distribution, and each one of these roles affords us an opportunity to influence. And occasionally I'll reflect on the leaders and mentors who've impacted me throughout my career, and I consider how they impacted my journey and how it might have been you're different had I not had the opportunity to interact with those folks. So it's that idea of passing the torch. We're not necessarily at the twilight of the career, but certainly on the other side of the middle. So we certainly want to pass all that energy and all that influence and inspire that next generation. So, as Kelly said, my name is Bret Getzel. This is my 32nd year. I like to do that. 32nd year in industry, been at it for quite a while. My background, as I said, is in production processing and sales leadership. So all in food service. I'm married. I have a lovely wife who's about to retire as an air traffic controller, 30 years doing that. So kudos to her. Father of 2 daughters, both of which are graduates of the University of Kansas. Go Jayhawks. My oldest works in IT security and risk management, and my youngest is finishing her second degree this spring and will be joining one of the big four auditing firms in Florida. So 2 successful
Oh,
young ladies in our family. And
yay.
again, I've often asked, how do I find the time to do what I do? And my answer is the same. If we look at our calendars, our day timers, whatever it is, you'll be able to quickly determine what you're passionate about. And I'm truly passionate about my team, my customers, my family, my faith, leadership. And I sprinkle in a little time for Chiefs and KU basketball. But I had a guy ask me this week, he said, "What are you doing this week?" And I said, "Oh, I'm speaking, with one of my partners at a leadership broadcast." And he said, "How do you find the time?" And I said, I'm passionate about it. It's important to me. And I think we all elevate those things that we're passionate about, and we make them a priority, and we make them important. So that's certainly one of the things I like to say, how are we spending our time, which is a reference back to one of the books we covered, which was Gary Williams, The One Thing. We really make important the things that are most important to us. So I think it's pretty interesting. I had a coworker, and I think this illustrates it best. I love stories, love illustrations. And he said, life's like a highway. And the way he actually drew this on a whiteboard, we don't have that luxury. I guess we could use our props here, but he drew a highway, and he said the highway represents your life. And he said the highway's, for the sake of discussion, full. And he said, just imagine an on-ramp, and on that on-ramp's another car, and that car represents another topic, another subject, another hobby, something you want to get on your highway. And he illustrated this. He said, something's got to speed up, something's got to slow down, or that highway's got to get bigger. And he's really talking about capacity in your life. And the way we make that highway bigger is we can sleep less, we can, stop doing something, we can start doing something. But in order for us to do anything differently, we've got to expand our capacity. And I think that speaks to this question that I got is, how do you find time to do what you do? Well, obviously, I've kicked the cars off the highway that aren't important. And I've limited probably the amount of sleep that I get because I have a lot of things that I'm very passionate about that I want to get done. So I got, one more update here that I think is so great. Last month, we talked about kicking off our team participant development project that we've got here at my company, Scavuzzo's. And the boss, the CEO of the company, is equally as passionate as I am about personal development, L&D. And he said, "Hey, could you do what you do in those conversations with Kelly? Could you do that in our company?" Yeah, sure. I'll do whatever you ask me to do. You're the CEO of the company. So I met with another employee that it was equally as passionate about learning and reading. And she said, hey, let's do this on a Trello board. And we built it exactly like the conversation boards we have there in business school, where we post a question and then the folks go on there and they comment, they'll offer their answer. And I and this, my co-partner will facilitate responses. And obviously we get some back and forth and some give and take. So we're happy to report we're in week 3. And we've had about 30 to 35 posts between my responses and theirs. So we had a total of 16 people that signed up. The company bought and paid for the books, which
And you're
I thought
doing
was a
7
great way
habits.
of walking the talk, so to speak. So we're in week 3. Things are going extremely well. The feedback's been overwhelmingly positive. So I get my reference here to Marshall Goldsmith, the Earned Life 101. Life is not a spectator sport. It's certainly meant to be lived. And all these people that are reading the book, the thing that's been probably the coolest part for me is walking throughout the building or being in a meeting and someone references one of the habits. We're into the second habit right now, which is start with the end in mind. The first one's be proactive. And it's just been very exciting to see people dropping those little things in the conversation. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. Last part. So I made a comment about writing things down and social proof. So 4,100 miles, that's the goal this year, to ride my bike. The weather's starting to break here in Kansas City. So my first week of measurable miles is supposed to be March 5th. So hopefully when we get together in a month, I'll have something to report about some miles I put down. But really relying on my partner there, Kelly, and our co-pilot Dave to be my accountability partners. But I'm looking forward to reporting each month how many miles I get accomplished.
Awesome. And you mentioned the Earned Life, and we did that book in August of last year, Marshall Goldsmith's book. And I kept waiting for a workbook to come out because he refers to asking yourself these questions and processing certain types of information and exercises. And when one didn't come out, I asked him if I could create one. And as you know, and so we collaborated on a workbook, and actually it came out and it is on Amazon now. So it's we haven't done any promotion yet at all, and so we're going to start the promotion in a couple months because he's really busy on other things. But it's very exciting to have collaborated with him. This author I've respected. I have several of his books, and reached out to do him a kind of a favor and tell him, I think your readers would really like this because I'm one and I wanted it. And really was excited to have that honor to collaborate with him on it. So people can.
You give any statistics, Kelly, as far as sales? Or I've never written a book. I don't have that experience, but I'd love to hear how it looks from the perspective of you as an author.
I did look the other day, so we haven't promoted it. I haven't done anything to promote it, but 9 people have bought copies. So I bought one just to see how the process was. My admin bought one. So 8 other people that I don't know bought them. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, they found it on Amazon and purchased it. So I don't know.
We haven't actually had a chance to talk about this in the pregame, but I write a monthly newsletter every other month, not exactly monthly, but it's 6,500 words, 7,000 words, depending on the month. And I probably spend about 20, 25 hours on it, proof it, at least 20 times. And as you probably did in the copyright process of your book, always found something you wanted to improve or change. And I do it on MailChimp is where I send it out. And there's something about when I hit send and I know what I wrote is going to 1,300 different people, there's a feeling there that's just hard to describe. And you and I haven't had the chance to really review that, but I can't imagine the sense you got when you said, you know what, it's going to the publisher and it's no longer adjustable or modifiable. Share a little bit about that, because the emotion had to just be overwhelming.
And especially when it's collaborating with someone else. So it's one thing when it's my own, and I've published other books of my own, but when it's somebody else who I hold in such high regard, I did feel a sense of pressure and a sense of accomplishment. And I felt so honored to get to do that with him and for his readers and people like us that would want to have it, that would benefit from it. So I really felt kind of honored to get to do it.
You should. I mean, think about this. I mean, your words and your thoughts and your opinions really will be forever memorialized, and that book will be out there for, the public consumption for, let's say, an indefinite period of time. But
Yeah.
Just the fact that I'm sitting here having a conversation with a published author really makes me proud. So kudos to you. I think it's just a tremendous accomplishment and tremendous achievement. You should be so proud, and you're in a rare class, and just kudos to you.
Well, thank you so much.
Well,
should we dive into this one?
Yeah, let's go.
So this one is the six types of working genius. That's the book, and it came out in I think November. No, it hasn't been out very long. Came out last year. And I think you brought this up for us to read, although we've all read his books over the years, but I think you brought this one up as a topic for us. But let me do a little bit about the author. Patrick Lencioni, he's from California, from Bakersfield. He excelled in academics and athletics, which I always think that's interesting because I draw a lot of parallels from athletics into leadership.
Absolutely.
As I did a lot in the past few weeks about the Super Bowl, which was won by the Kansas City Chiefs. Let's see. He was student body president and valedictorian of his high school class. He got a bachelor's degree in economics and Spanish from Claremont McKenna College, and was recruited out of undergrad to Bain, and then worked for Oracle and Sybase, where he left there as a vice president of OD. And then, so he worked in a professional career for about 10 years, and then he started his own company, and that was about 30 years ago. And so he's been running his own firm, the Table Group, ever since. So he does most of his time on speaking and writing about leadership, teamwork, and organizational health. And he consults with executives and their teams. This was his 13th book. And I think if you added all of mine together, I think I've sold about 20,000 books so far of my own. And he has sold over 6 million. So they've been translated into more than 30 languages, and he lives in the Bay Area with his wife and 4 kids. So this book is kind of interesting you know what? I forgot to look to see if there's comments. Sorry. So if you are watching live, feel free to put comments. We aren't able to comment back, but we will see your comments. So if you have questions, please feel free to chime in, or if you're familiar with the book or the assessment, let us know. But this one is
let me jump in here one time. So you talked about what he does. He's got a couple different podcasts he does. He's got a podcast dedicated to working genius, and then he's got a podcast dated Patrick Lencioni, which is part of the Table Group, and he has some of his executives and other people that are on those podcasts, which that kind of got me thinking. And Kelly and I think you guys know, we pre-gamed this, and we didn't ever talk about this, but I actually met with our CEO and I said, hey, I listen to 4 or 5 podcasts. What podcasts do you listen to? And he shared those with me, and I've started to listen to a couple of those. And I follow a couple other authors. There's one his name's Anthony Iannarino, and he largely speaks about sales leadership and sales process. And he actually dropped a link, and I think he posts on LinkedIn at least once or twice a month. But he posted one. He said, "What are you reading?" And I posted. Obviously, I'm an avid reader, so I posted in there, and the thread went on and on and on and on. And I read several of those, and I picked up other titles. So what's the point? I'm going to update my reading list, which we do that for each other about once every 3 months. And I'll send it to Kelly, and Kelly will post it on the website. But what are your thoughts, Kelly, about potentially posting podcasts we're listening to? I'd love to have people put in the comments over here podcasts that they enjoy, maybe why they get them, what are the value. I'd love to really kind of maybe put a podcast we listen to on our website, the same as we do books we're reading. Because
right on.
That's a very, very popular way to consume content. I'm looking for your feedback or what your opinion is of that, Kelly.
I think that'd be great. And you know what? It just occurred to me for the Culture Matters group that I facilitate every month. We have a group on LinkedIn for that. We could create a group for this where we could continue the discussion, as a group. Anybody that's interested in talking about leadership books, that's like right now, people could comment on the event in LinkedIn, but then you're just commenting on the event. And so if we created a group, anybody in the group could see that, any comments. So we could do that. And that's where you could just post, sorry, it's something in my eye. You could post something about a podcast and put a link in there, and anybody that's interested in that leadership development type of thing.
And I'll be honest with everybody. I mean, I have an agenda here, let's call it that. I want to expand the content, right? And it could be authors, it could be
Yeah.
titles, it could be podcasts. But if Kelly's listening to a podcast and she said, you know what, this is a winner, and this goes back to that whole mentoring or reading thing, personal development, where people, I think, are willing and they have an appetite to invest in themselves, but they're just not sure where to go. And they're reluctant, they're hesitant, they have trepidation about investing the commodity of time until somebody in a position of authority recommends or makes a suggestion. So this is my opportunity for our listening audience and maybe the people that follow us on LinkedIn to say, hey, you know what, I have an opportunity to contribute back. And wouldn't it be cool if a podcast or book that I read or listened to, that Kelly, Brett, and Dave end up covering that at some point? So I'm coming clean. I'm laying it on the table. I've got an agenda here. Yeah.
Well, and you can post it on LinkedIn and tag us too, and that would go to all of our people.
Absolutely.
And so while we're on that subject, I read this book this week as well, The Soul of the Deal by Mark Morgenstern. And I'm going to interview him March 9th. And so I'll be promoting that soon. So I'm going to have a one-on-one with him. We just talked, we had a pregame the other day, had a great conversation. It went way over the booked time, and can't wait to share him with everybody. And he's an accomplished executive and attorney, and been involved with all kinds of M&As, and Berkeley professor, I think, and just he's on the board of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Oh, wow.
So it's a totally cool guy, and interesting, and had a really cool take on negotiation that I got a lot of nuances about that I think will be interesting to share with people. So, you know,
I'm chuckling because we did the Working Six Geniuses, and you did, I think you called it the soul of the deal. So check the box. You read at least 2 this month. So it's amazing to me. People say, well, I can't even read a book a month, and I'm disappointed if I don't read at least 2. So
I do like 3 or 4.
High five on that.
Yeah, right on. Okay, so let's dig into this because we're at a little bit almost 4:20. Okay,
so one of your questions was thoughts about the book in general. So you know, my notes here, you know, I've got, for those who've read Lencioni's books, they're all kind of similar, right? They start out illustrating a concept, they're fictional. So you really have to go into the books with what I call your eyes wide open. You sort of know what you're going to get. They're not overly heavy. They're not overly deep. They're not highly academic in any stretch. I mean, I don't want to put a grade level on them or anything like that, but they're you kind of know what you're going to get. So I've spoken to a lot of different people about many different books, and the responses with particularly Lencioni are polarizing. Either you love them or you hate them. You never really find anybody, at least that I do anyway, that kind of fall in the middle. You're either one end of the bell bar or the other. So given the number of books that he sold, you really have to think that there's clearly an audience for his delivery, his platform, his message. And I'm not going to reserve judgment. Obviously, I have my opinions. I had an agenda here to read the book, to cover it for this month, but I'll just let the numbers speak for themselves. That's my opinion. Back to you, Kelly.
Yeah, I thought that, I mean, the same. I wasn't a big fan of the book. I thought the story in the beginning was long, and it wasn't my favorite. I didn't think it was written that great. So I'm not going to recommend the book, but I do like the 6 Geniuses as a very simple tool. The assessment you can take at workinggenius.com. And I just put the link to the website so you can get the handout. The handout that we created this month, that I created, it has the link to the assessment at the bottom. It has the 6 types on it. And it has some questions for you, so you can kind of think about it as you're listening to our conversation. But the book doesn't go into the background of any of the foundation of the types, other than just he and some people kind of thought about what types of work they do, and so what the types are. So I thought it was a little bit light in that area, and I know his type of work, so I didn't think that it was going to be academic, but I thought there'd be a little more beef to it based on what it is. So my recommendation would be skip the book, go to the website, get the free resources, and take the assessment. And so Brett and I took the assessment, and so from there, let's talk about the 6 types. Do you want to do an overview of? Do we need to do an overview, do you think?
Yeah, I think we should. That's probably the meat and the potatoes of it. So for anybody who's read Raving Fans, or Who Moved Their Cheese, or The Go-Givers, or the Goal, that all illustrate their points around a fictional company or a fictional person, that's what you're getting, right? So, Lencioni's team, the way I like to put it, they're nothing if not good marketers. They've got the Table Group, Working Genius websites, multiple podcasts, and as Kelly pointed out, they do offer the assessment. I think the book was $25. The assessment was $25.
Yeah.
So we got $50 in this thing right now is what we got to look at it. So, and if you've taken a Myers-Briggs or you've taken a Hogan assessment, any of those, they're very similar. And my comment is I'm always amazed at how accurately they can profile. And as Kelly pointed out, this is her specialty. So she can talk at length about how the questions are designed to get certain results, things like that. So I like to think that I'm kind of unique, that I'm highly evolved, that I'm reasonably intelligent, but these assessments, they nail me every time. So maybe I'm kidding myself a little bit, but anyhow, we'll let that stand on its own. But to Kelly's point, I mean, the book, if you do choose to go that route, it's 224 pages and it moves very, 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 very quickly. I consumed it in a weekend. So to the different geniuses, as Kelly pointed out, there's 6. I'll tell you, I scored what they called an IT, which is Invention and Tenacity. So I'll cover those 2, turn it over to Kelly. So invention is about coming up with novel ideas and solutions to solve problems. And again, that's my personality to a T, right? I look at a situation and try to identify the problem, and I fall back on the data. I analyze the process or lack thereof. It may or may not have a solution, and it's usually something that's been pervasive within an organization or a team for some time. And generally people aren't taking the effort or the energy to solve the problem. They just learn to exist with it. And I think that's what probably sums up the invention piece the best. Mm-hmm. As far as tenacity goes, which was my other genius, and we'll talk about how the results come out of the assessment in a second, but invention is one, tenacity is the other. So tenacity is about execution. Once you've identified the problem, then it's a function of execution. And so it really involves getting things done, achieving results, seeing something to the conclusion. The other thing that he didn't use this word within tenacity, but I kept looking for the word accountability, because I think tenacity has traits or tones of what you and I would say are accountability. So those are the first 2. Back to you, Kelly.
And mine were discernment and enablement. Mm-hmm. And discernment I thought was interesting because that ties into one of the Jesuit core values that I bring into class a lot. And that's the natural gift of intuitively and instinctively evaluating ideas and situations. So, and then enablement is providing encouragement and assistance for an idea and project. So those were my 2. And then the other 2, excuse me, are wonder. That's the gift of pondering possibility of greater potential and opportunity. And then galvanizing is rallying, inspiring, and organizing others. So we didn't share them in order, but the idea in the book is that they kind of go in a certain order, so that there's a wonder of, I wonder how things could be better. Mm-hmm. And then the invention person, which was Brett, comes up with a solution. So somebody's thinking there's got to be a better way. Then the invention person thinks of a better way. The discernment person advances that and kind of analyzes that. The galvanizing person rallies people, gets them involved. Enablement, which was my other one, encourages people and moves it along. And then the tenacity, which was Brett's other one, gets it done, takes it to the finish line. So there's a process. I learned that process years ago, and we called it the Z model. So the idea, the people, the strategy and the details, and then the getting it done. So it's a similar process. But this assessment, I liked it because it's different than personality. It's more about the type of work you like to spend your time on, and how kind of like what you like to do. And so I liked it because it adds another layer. So if your company or your team has done Myers-Briggs or DISC or Strengths, I like the strengths.com tool. Or I know there's another Strengths as well, but if you've done those, this is another one, and it's only $25 a person. So it's another layer to the team that you can add to it. So I think it's something kind of interesting. And then on the website, they give a team worksheet. So I did one for us. So they give you this. And then you can map out your team. So you can put the names of your team on there, and then you can see where there's gaps. And so we don't have Dave's, but if we were going to be working on a project together, we could see that that we don't have somebody that is a genius in the galvanizing area. And then we, let's see. So my discernment is a genius, but it's a frustration of Bret's. So we'd want to know that ahead of time, because I could be very discerning and that could be driving him nuts. I could be doing it too long. I could do it too soon. And that could drive him nuts. We'd want to have an open conversation about that early. His genius and coming up with ideas, that's a frustration to me. So he could be doing that too early, or he could be doing that too long, or he could be doing that later when we're already down the road toward a solution. He could, I have another idea. And I might want to say, no, dude, we're already over here doing one. So that's how, team dynamics can go. So just having that kind of conversation early to know to watch for these things would really help avoid conflict later. And I think it causes a smoother road for a lot of team dynamics. So in that vein, I liked the assessment. The questions, I did not like how some of the questions, or how the questions are worded. I didn't see the point in how they were asked and how you compare to other people. So I thought that threw in a layer that was unnecessary, and that was not explained anywhere on the website that I saw. So I would say take it as it is. Don't look for any kind of science behind it, or don't overanalyze it. I would use the assessment.
I think that's a good way to put it. You showed the team graphic, and he uses a graphic of each genius. That's 6 geniuses, and each one is a gear, and the gears are independent. He starts out in the book just having circles, and he makes the comment that his wife, I think, suggested that he use a gear to show the interconnectivity of that. What I kept going to in my head was the ability or the need of successful leaders, highly successful leaders, to build teams. And doing this as long as I have and been a part of multiple teams, it's always interesting to reflect on the teams that were highly evolved, highly successful, had good working habits, and then those that weren't. And I really made 2 observations, and I firmly believe these. You can have a great leader who doesn't form a good team and doesn't get much done.
Right.
And then you can have a great team that lacks a great leader that gets all kinds of things done. And it's that team dynamic, that organizational behavior, that organizational health, and really speaks to, if I had a team that had representation of each of the 6 geniuses, the likelihood that that team would be highly effective is probably pretty high. Where I could have a team that lacked the 6 geniuses but had a great leader, and maybe through the sheer will of that leader, that team is effective. But more often than not, there's going to be conflict, there's going to be discord, and that team probably won't be as highly evolved if they had addressed each one of those needs. The point I make there is the ability, and we talk about emotional intelligence a lot, and the skills and attributes and traits of a successful leader. And it's this ability to build teams. And I wish I could tell you it was more science than art, but I believe it is a lot of art. And you see this so often where a CEO moves from one company to the next, and what do? They take their team with them.
Right.
And you think, well, why is that, right? Were the team that he go into, the team that he assumed, were they not, effective? Well, obviously he was very effective at the job he left, which is why he got the new job. So why not bring the team with him that made him so successful, and rinse and repeat rather than start all over? So I really think that there's a lot of value to that. So the other part that I really highlighted was this idea of being self-aware. And obviously, as you heard me talk about, we're talking about the 7 habits here at my company, and self-awareness is a big component of the Covey material, and that idea of being able to reflect and understand what our core competencies are as individuals is so important. So I know that all sounds very business school like, but after seeing in the different teams throughout my 30 plus years, I really believe in this idea of team over trumps or triumphs over the individual. So that's my comment there.
Yeah, and I think that self-awareness of what is your preferred type of work, and how do you create that? And does your job now have that? And I had a coaching client recently that is in a job that does not have it. And so needs to figure out, is there a job in his current company, or does he need to move on to find one that has more of the style of work that he wants to have? Likes the people, likes the organization, but is not a fit for the type of work that he is doing anymore. And so no harm, no foul. He's not mad at anybody, but just things change, and he does not want to keep doing the same.
Well, you'll hear stories of people that literally take a drop in compensation to find a cultural fit or a personal fit, and their quality of life and their personal fulfillment actually is exemplified. So nothing wrong with that at all. So thoughts about the assessment? You asked about that, Kelly. As Kelly said, my genius is in invention and tenacity. We've covered that. My work, and the way they break it down, they have your competencies, or your geniuses, your competencies, and then your frustrations. And my competencies, which are kind of middle, and as I looked at them, I really kind of agreed with it again, are galvanizing and enablement, and which are traits of inspiring people and encouraging others. And I'm better at that than I was, and I do believe that these things can be learned, and I am growing in that area. But I wouldn't, as the assessment pointed out, I wouldn't say those are my geniuses. And then obviously, wonder and discernment are the last two. Wonder is a word for vision casting, and I'm doing more of that in the job that I am now than I probably ever have before, where I have to look into the future and actually cast a vision. So that's a skill that's growing rapidly. And then discernment speaks to intuition. As I read that one, that nailed me. Intuition is really making a decision without all the facts, without all the data. And as Kelly talked about, that's one of her strengths. And boy, I tell you what, I don't know if it's an insecurity of mine, but I have a tendency to overanalyze and grab all the data that I can, run the models, look at all the information before I make a decision. So I guess that can be both a curse and a blessing, but it certainly fits a frustration of mine. And again, I just had to chuckle because it's amazing how these things can profile you so accurately.
That's so funny.
Exactly.
Well, and some of the description, like some of the discernment is guidance, and I think you're good at that.
Yeah. So, one of the things I think with these things is, what do you do with them? I mean, you mentioned DISC, you mentioned Myers-Briggs. I talked to you earlier about the Hogan assessment, the 6 geniuses, and I really challenged myself. Can we change those things? I'm going to say no. I think we can exemplify our strengths. Can we minimize our weaknesses? But can we ever truly reinvent ourselves and be somebody that we're not? And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say no. Obviously, personal behavior or health is your strengths. I'd be interested to get your opinion on that, but I just don't believe that you can completely switch everything around. So how do you feel about that, Kelly?
I don't think you can, but you can flex. I mean, we're smart enough that we can adapt our style. Somebody is the style to get to the point. We don't need to come in and yip yap about the weekend. We can get to the point. So
ironically, I came to the conversation this afternoon right out of a 4-hour workshop on interviewing. And the reason that I think that's applicable here, everybody in the room I shouldn't say everybody, there was a diverse group in the room of men, women, different races, age, experiences. And the whole premise of this is that we can learn, we can develop, we can become a better version of ourselves. Now, whether or not we can flip our personality traits, I don't think we can, but I thought it was kind of ironic that I was going through that training, because here I am, like I said, all these years of experience, and I'm sitting there scribbling notes in this workshop of all the areas that I have to improve on. So that's my way of saying, hey, I don't think we're ever a finished product. And I think if we continue to identify and be self-aware about our blind spots, we can continue to improve. And I don't know that we'll ever be done. I mean, I think I looked up Marshall Goldsmith's age. Isn't he 72 or 75?
Yeah.
And he's still coaching CEOs, and he makes the comment all the time that he learns more from the coaching engagements than he believes the CEOs do. So
well, and the world changes, people change. The workplace is different now than it was 3 years ago. So if you're not changing and adapting, you're going to be out. And you're going to be miserable until you're out. So
we talk about all the jobs that people are being trained for that won't exist in 5 years. So you asked a couple points about the book that these kind of stuck out at me. I always dog ear the pages that I think are kind of interesting. And he had one there, which again, this isn't new, but it just reinforces this idea. He called it the 3 stages of work. First stage was ideation, which that's that vision casting, right? That wonderment, that invention, that ideation phase. Then he's got activation, And I made a point about this where I'm sure we've all been on groups or teams or committees or organizations where we just never get out of the planning phase. And you a month goes by, 2 months goes by, 3 months go by, and then somebody says, well, let's do a postmortem, and you realize you've got nothing done.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all been there, and obviously with my geniuses, you can't imagine how frustrating that is for me. Finally, I'll tell people, I'll put my pad and paper down and say, look, it's time for somebody to do something. We got to get something done. So, but it's anyway, ideation, activation, and then implementation. So eventually the planning has to stop, the wondering has to stop, the visioning has to stop, and somebody's got to do something so we have some measurable results. And, he also detailed how 3 of the geniuses fall above, and he calls them disruption and responsive is what he called it, which I thought was very interesting. And he splits them 3 on top and 3 on bottom. Obviously the tenacity, the invention, and I forget the third one that went with disruptive, but then the other 3, galvanizing. The other 3, which were wonder, discernment, and enablement. Both were the ones that were responsive. So, and I talked a little bit about these organizations. I had to just laugh. So case in point, I'm president of our local homeowners association. Great one, right? Everybody's a volunteer. And we always talk about, if you really think you're a volunteer, go try to run a group of, or if you really think you're a leader, go try to run a group of volunteers. So that aside, so our, the HOA is a collection of volunteers, right? We all have a common interest in that. We volunteer our time, talent, and treasures to really receive nothing in return other than the neighborhood. So it takes a mix of different geniuses to actually get things done. And Lencioni details this with his lead character. The lead character in the book's a guy named Bull, and they illustrate that he goes and joins a committee at his church and how effective that is. And as he was illustrating the book, I kept going back to my business school professor, Dr. Kelly Phipps, and he actually teaches org behavior. And he had this technique, which I think is so interesting. He goes to a whiteboard and he just writes down what people hear. And he said he doesn't say anything, he doesn't do anything, but people that they feel validated when their thoughts are memorialized on a whiteboard. Why that is, I guess that's just a human thing we have. And he said everything that somebody says, he writes down, and then his comment back to everybody is why. There's actually a technique called the 5 whys, if you've ever seen that, and that's all he does. And he said it's amazing how people will actually solve their own problems by him writing them on the board and then just responding to why with everything that they do. So, it's that whole concept of org behavior and org health, and it's continually evolving. I believe the value that leadership and organizations are putting on, again, it's a soft skill, right? It falls under the humanities, that they're putting on that, I think, is becoming more and more important. The one thing that I think is interesting is we often do this in hindsight, right? We evaluate the effectiveness of teams in arrears, but very rarely do we think about it going in. And as we were going through the interviewing workshop today, I kept thinking in the back of my mind, I wonder if the EEOC would allow us to do a working geniuses assessment of our interview candidates. And if you were to profile and say, hey, I'm interviewing for tenacity, or I'm interviewing for invention, if we could actually do an assessment like that. I don't think that probably is legal, and I don't know that anybody's going to do that. I was thinking of my corporate law professor, Jameson Shipman, and I would say if I asked him that, he would probably say it depends, and I think that's the answer.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what the lawyer would say.
Every time you ask. So,
but they do a lot of companies do different types of assessments on personalities and stuff, and I would think a work-related one would be, even a conversation about this would be better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or at least as useful. And some of it you can tell from their type of work and why they want to do this, whatever the type of job is.
Sure.
But you just gave away my whole secret to executive coaching, that 5 whys. So I'm going to cut this videotape off so that I'm not going to post this.
Oh, well, in all honesty, I'll come clean. I stole that from somebody. So.
Oh no, that's a famous. I'm sure I might have even shared that with you. That's a big. Yeah. That's a common.
No, I was networking with the CEO, and we were going through problem solving, and went back to the Lean 6 process. And he says I use a combination of the DMAIC process, which is actually on the board behind me, with the 5 whys. So no, I stole that. I mean, and Kelly and I talk about that all the time. Nothing that we're covering probably was invented yesterday. Right. It's just it's new content that people have taken a fresh approach to and repackaged it.
Yeah. Okay, well, so a couple of my points for the book I think are important is that if you do find a job that you are in your genius, you're never going to have a job that's like that the whole day, all day, every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so be careful of what you expect out of your job, and have reasonable expectations. And you want to manage your energy, your capacity, emotional, mental, and all of that. So, but just monitor your own expectations of that. I feel like I should say today's the conversation is brought to you by Milkbone because
That's hilarious. We've never had a sponsor before. I wonder if we could call them and get some. Oh my goodness, you're killing me here. Oh my goodness, that's awesome.
And then another one was an example in the story in the book about people have to pay their dues. And so paying their dues, doing the type of tenacity work when that's not your thing. I want to just say, be careful of that to the leaders of requiring people to be in a job for too long that's not really a fit, because they're going to pay their dues in that type of a role, and tenacity of just doing what they're told, or, taking direction from all those other geniuses and genius types. And then they're going to take that skill set that they learned and all that information. They're going to leave and go get the next level up. They're going to leave and go somewhere else because they've been forced to be in a type of a job that's not really a fit. So for too long. So make sure as a leader you're watching this for yourself, which is what we've talked about, right. But that you're watching out for your people as well. So I would encourage you to pay attention to that too. So that's my final point about the type of book, about the assessment.
Yeah, my final point, I said, the 6 types of genius, the key, I think, is to really be self-aware. You've got to know yourself, and you can do that through reflection. You can do it through assessments, but you really have to have an idea of where you belong, where you're energized, where you get your strength, where you get your energy from. And I think that's so important. And then I think secondly is to really understand the value of highly effective teams, and to be effective. I truly believe this. We need diversity, and diversity can be in the geniuses. It can be in gender, race, color, orientation, but there really is no substitution. And this isn't a pitch for DEI. That's not what this is about. I've been on enough teams throughout my career to see that three versions of me that don't get it done, but my contribution complemented by people that aren't exactly like me, that's when the magic happens. And I really believe that. So the 2 takeaways, again, being highly self-aware and then recognizing the value of teamwork. So, we email very frequently throughout the month. I rely on Kelly for emotional support. She's my sounding board for so many different things, and we feed off of one another in that regard. So throughout the month, we're asking each other, what are you reading? What are you doing? Where are you speaking? And granted, I mean, we're low-level people compared to some of these people that literally make a living, the Dory Clarks of the world and those kind of people. But she asked, what are you reading? Because as we mentioned earlier, I said, hey, try to read 2 a month. And so I said, hey, I'm reading Viktor Frankl. So I like to look at, and we've talked about this a lot in our different books, because all the authors quote other authors. And I'm convinced of all the material that I read, and it's kind of all in this genre. The 3 that are most quoted are The 7 Habits by Covey, Dr. Carol Dweck's Mindset. Those 2 are almost in every book. And then the third one, which I'm just starting, is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. So Viktor Frankl, for those of you who do or don't know, was a Holocaust survivor. He's a Jewish Austrian psychiatrist, and wrote a book about how he was able to basically suffer and endure through the Holocaust experience, and lost, I think, virtually his entire family. His brothers, his sisters, his mothers, his father, I think his spouse. Don't hold me on that, but he lost much of his family in the Holocaust, and then came out of that. And he invented a psychiatric discipline called logotherapy. I'm not an expert on that, so I'll learn and unpack all about Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning and logotherapy this month, and I'll have a whole lot more to share with everybody next month on that. So anything to add there, Kelly?
And that's going to be our book for next month. So Man's Search for Meaning will be March's book, March 23rd. So the 4th Thursday of March, that will be our topic. And I think that is it for today.
So look for the revised reading list. We'll get that posted.
Yeah.
Look for a discussion or some type of highlight on the podcast. I'd love to hear what podcasts you're reading, and know that we're always interested in titles and books and authors that you guys find energizing and uplifting, and really kind of speak to learning and development, personal development, leadership. That's obviously where we're focused on. So, we always focus on our why, right? Which is to inspire the leaders of tomorrow to invest in themselves today. And I always like to add the little tagline, it's the best investment you'll ever make. So have a great month, everybody. Thanks for joining our conversation, and keep reading.
Yeah. Thanks, Brett. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you soon.